Hello viewers, welcome to Law Excellence. So today we are going to discuss about Wagner group, and this is a very special group. This group was the one which was praised by Russia during its involvement in Russia-Ukraine war, and this group has suddenly become a kind of rebel group, and due to which a deal has to be brokered by the Belarus president between Russia and this Wagner group. And what is this Wagner group is about? A group which was praised by Russian president a lot and suddenly has become a kind of rebel group. So what are the issues involved and what happened? All these particular things we'll discuss in this particular session. So initially, if you look at this group is the one which is officially called as PMC. PMC means private military company. So usually a kind of private military group is banned illegal in Russia, and this Wagner group is a kind of paramilitary group. These are a kind of paramilitary group. It means it's a kind of private military group. So these kind of private military groups are those groups which are illegal in Russia, but still this group is the one which was actually registered as a kind of private military company under Russia. The reason behind it was because the head of the Wagner group, Prigozhin, was a close ally of Putin. So Putin is the one who's authoritative ruler of Russia for almost 2 decades, and because of his kind of close, as he's a close ally of Putin, that is the reason why this group has actually become a kind of private military group, has actually was established as a kind of private military company. And this group has initially started its operation during the annexation of Crimea in 2014. So in 2014, Crimea was it was under the control of Ukraine. So Russia felt that there was a kind of Western influence in Crimea, so much of Western influence in Crimea, and it was scared that even Crimea might join NATO. So that is, and also Crimea is bordered by all its three sides by the sea, and that is a reason. And because Russia wanted to capture the sea route, and that is a reason why the Russia has annexed the Crimea. So that was the time when this Wagner group has actually started its first operation, and later on it has become very famous because of its operations in the African countries. When we look at African countries, this group is so much involved in African countries. Especially when we look at African countries, these are the countries where mostly there are crisis-ridden countries. When we look at Sudan, Sudan also right now there is so much of crisis is going on. These are the countries where there are so much of authoritative rule. There is no democratic countries as such. Mali, all these countries are rich in resources, but they don't have a kind of proper governments. So in this particular African countries, this group is very, very active, and it usually supports the authoritative government, and it is involved in the civil war in this African countries. And this Wagner group has usually has a control of gold mines, diamond mines in the African country, and this group is very, very famous for its ruthless violence. And Russia has actually supported this group because this is not a kind of legal defense force of Russia. And even if at all any kind of international organizations, if they accuse Russia regarding this group, it can saying that it is not the legally sponsored group of Russia, but Russia can have a kind of influence in Africa through this group. And as such, if we see, this group has become a kind of diplomacy of Russia in Africa. And due to this particular group involvement in in the African states, the Russia could actually get a kind of 15 absentence from African countries because of the involvement of this Wagner group. Because in the UN General Assembly, when all the other countries were accusing Russia because of its involvement in Russia-Ukraine war, at this point of time, it could actually get a kind of 15 absentees from African countries because of the involvement of this Wagner group. So this group has become a kind of diplomacy of Russia because Russia cannot legally do the kind of gross violation of human rights. but which this Wagner group is involved and which is actually doing in African countries where it is actually supporting the authoritative government and where Russia could easily get the kind of resources from Africa. But suddenly, how come this group has become a kind of rebel group? So actually what happened was, this group, the head of this group, Prigozhin, has accused the defense minister of Russia, Shigoyu, and the head of the army in Ukraine, Gerasimov, saying that these people were under supplying arms to this Wagner group when those people were involved in Russia-Ukraine war, and also these defense forces have killed certain Wagner group soldiers as well. So that was the reason why the Prigozhin was very unhappy with the defense minister and also the head of the army in Ukraine, this Gerasimov. So that is the reason why he has actually headed towards the Russia. So initially he has seized the control of military headquarters of Rostov city in Russia, and later when he was heading towards Moscow, so that was a time when the Belarus president has brokered a deal with Prigozhin, and accordingly the kind of a rebel group was halted. The kind of march towards the Moscow was halted. This is not a kind of coup, but just that they wanted to seize the military headquarters because they were unhappy with the defense minister and the head of the army, because these people have apparently bombed there the soldiers of the Wagner group. And Vladimir Putin was very unhappy with Prigozhin because he was somebody who was a close ally of Vladimir Putin. That was the reason why this Wagner group was prevalent, and that was the reason why Wagner group was supported by Russia. And suddenly when it has become a kind of rebel group, so Putin was very unhappy, and he has actually sent the Prigozhin in exile to Belarus. And why the Belarus was involved in this deal regarding this rebel group was, this is a neighboring country of both Ukraine and Russia, and Belarus is presently facing the crisis of migration because of the Russia-Ukraine war. And if at all there is any kind of internal crisis in Russia or Ukraine, Belarus would get affected. So that is the reason why the Belarus president has brokered the deal between the Wagner group and the Russian President Vladimir Putin. And presently the soldiers of Wagner who are loyal to the military would be joined to the Russian military, and who are not loyal would be completely disbanded. But this group might actually might be headed by a new president in the future, because this group has actually played a very important role in the African diplomacy of Russia. Because of this group itself, the Russia could get the kind of mineral resources or the resources from the Africa easily. And if at all this group is completely disbanded, then Russia might lose its kind of diplomacy in the Africa, which is having right now because of this particular Wagner group. And also this presently the kind of rebel group it has become, it has actually showed a kind of weakness of Vladimir Putin. So he's a 2-decade ruler of Russia, and because of this rebel group, it has showed a kind of weakness which the Vladimir Putin is having, and also the kind of internal crisis which is having in Russia during its involvement in the Russian-Ukraine war. So maybe this group, Wagner group, might resume under a different leadership because of its involvement in the African countries, where it has a strong holder of many resources. Like the way I told you guys that it has a control of many gold mines and diamond mines in the African countries. So that is the reason why it has become a rebel group, because because the Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner group, was unhappy with Shogu and Gerasimov. The reason he was unhappy was they have bombarded the soldiers of they have bombed the soldiers of the Wagner group. So that is the reason why the rebel group has headed towards Moscow, and right now they have withdrawn the forces because of the deal which was brokered by the Belarus president. So that is regarding the Wagner group. So see you all in the next class with a new topic. Thank you.